Okay, so let's start to our second part, or you can say the second part of the framework, where we are going to use a test design pattern, which is also famously known as page object model. Okay, here the concept is dividing your page objects into different classes. Okay, or grouping your page objects into different classes and make reusable methods for all the actions. So, or you will have different page object classes depending on what type of application you are working on. Right? So it may be divided based on business actions, or it may be divided on different parts of your application or different functionalities of your application. Now, there is no hard and fast rule that each page object class should uh, basically implement a page of an application, but that's the best practice which is followed across the industry. But there is no hard and fast rule, as I said. Depending on the application, you can have different strategies which you can put in place. Okay. Now, since this is an e-commerce application which I have, and there are different parts of the application, but then every part of the application is also a different page, right? So like I have a login page, I have a register page, right? Similarly, I have a shopping cart page, a checkout page, then different items page, right? So I can divide uh, my page objects based on these different pages, which I will be creating different classes. Okay. The simple reason for dividing them into different pages is easy management of all your different page objects, because you are going to have a lot of different page objects for each different page, right? And it's best that you put it across in different classes, otherwise it will be difficult to manage. Okay, after a while. So let's go back to our script. So that was all about the page object design pattern. And as I said, we are going to put a level of abstraction here, right? Where we are now calling, we are directly writing the script here, but in real world scenario, you don't want to do that. Okay, so I have a different section called page objects. Okay, inside this, I'm going to create different page object classes. So I'll call it the login page. I can call a home page, right? So there would be different classes like this, different pages, and each class will contain all the different objects of this particular page. Also, all the different methods which you are going to perform, or actions which you are going to perform on all those objects, right? So a page class should contain all the objects and all the different actions which you are going to perform on those page objects. Okay, so starting with the login page, I have got the email field, password field, forgotten password link, the login button. So these are the main page objects which are present in my login form, right? So there are also different ways of how you want to put your page objects, right? So I will show you some of the ways. So public static string, and I'm going to call this okay, txt email, right? And we need the XPath. So this is one way of defining your page objects, right? To make it consistent across my framework or project, I want to use XPath for each object or each page element, right? So that when I'm going to use this particular XPath, I'm going to create a web element out of using this particular XPath so that I can identify this particular element on the page. Okay. Now it's not necessary you have to use XPath. You can also use different elements like the ID or name, right? Or XPath or CSS. But I wanted to make it consistent across my application. So I'm going to use XPath for all the page objects. So we already have this. Let's take it from there. And then we will have another element which is present in this page, which is called the forgotten password. Although we are not using it, for future references, we can also add this element. Okay. So how are we going to identify this element? We can use the XPath text method. Plus there are, you can see there are two elements with the same link. Okay. So what we can do is we can use the index here. Use the first index. Okay, so these are all the kind of static values, right? These contain, you can say my properties or the object, you can say locator, right? Element locator. So in the form of XPath, and I'm storing it in a string value, okay, which is these values. So these are all the elements, how you want to identify them, that information. And then you also need information or methods which will basically contain the action which you want to perform on these different elements, right? So for text fields, we want to enter something. For buttons, we want to click on them, right? Or links. So, or we want to perform any particular validation, right? So everything should be in the form of a method. So public static void, I will say enter username. And since it will take a value, right? So I will say txt username. So this will be my user defined value, right? Which I want to enter into this particular field. Now I'm making it reusable in the sense it can be used across anywhere, right? Because it contains obviously this particular element which will be located by this particular XPath. But then you can pass any value to this username field. It is not static. You can pass any string value and then it will enter any particular username into this field. So that way I am making it reusable across my scripts. Okay. Now inside this, I am going to write the implementation. Okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to remove this particular line from here. And now what we need to do, okay, so driver.find element, and this will be by.xpath and txt email. Okay, and then dot send keys will use this txt username. Okay, so this is the element locator and this is the actual value which we are passing. So you have to pass the driver initialization, and hence for all the page object classes you need to extend the base class. Okay, now similarly you can have for enter password, and here again txt password which you want to enter, use it here. Okay, so I cannot have both the values similar. Let's call this text box or something. Or let's call this just username. Okay, and similarly, we can have one for clicking on the login button. We don't need any parameter here because it doesn't accept any value. It's just forming a click, right? So we require the XPath here, and then we are just going to click on this. And similarly, we can have another method for on the forgotten password. Okay, so this is how a page object class should look, right? So first it should contain all your elements with their locators, and then it should contain all the reusable methods through which you can perform some action on those page elements which you have defined in your page class. So everything should be contained inside your page class. So whenever you are referring to this page class, you can have access to all these different methods and the element locators, right? So it will be easier to manage when you have different pages and each page will have its own page elements. Okay. Now, how we can implement them? So we can remove all the scripts from our step definitions. And what we need to do is we just need to call our login page class, right? And I will call enter username. Okay, and I need to pass the username value here. Similarly, I will call login page dot enter password and login page dot click login. Okay, so these are the methods we are going to use. And now you can see it's now much cleaner. Also, the actual implementation of this particular step definition is abstracted or hidden from the user, right? Um, a user can see what method is being called, but he cannot see the implementation in this particular class. Obviously, to go to the implementation, you can go back to the method, which is basically providing you with the implementation, right? So this is the way you have to design your framework so that there are multiple levels of abstraction. Now, this is the first level. I'm going to show you more levels, how you can put more abstraction into your code. Okay. Now the only thing pending here is we need to pass the values here, right? Now, I don't want to pass the static values. Again, we are going to use the properties, right? Since we have defined it inside our different application.properties, these values are already present. So let's go here. We'll say load application properties. We'll define a properties instance here. And then I will say get property of username. I will say string user name equals to this, and I will pass the username here. Let's see if we can do this outside the class. Okay, so I will just load it once, not for every particular method. And then we will just call that object which we have created or instance to get our property which we are looking for. And pass it here. Okay, so that completes our script. Now you can see we are using all the configuration values and we are calling reusable methods to execute our step definition. No scripts, no static values. So that's one part of using a framework. Okay, so this is how you will design your page object class with all the elements and methods, and then use those methods in your step definition files. So now you can see there is a flow being created, right? You can call it your project flow or you can call it your framework flow, right? So instead of just going from the feature file to step definition, now the flow is extended, right? Now it is going. So the flow, let's look at the flow right now, right? So it will start from this test runner, right? So which is going to call this feature file, okay? The execution is going to trigger and it is going to call this login.feature file, okay? So it is going to go, the control is going to go to this login.feature file where it is going to go through this keywords, feature scenario, and then it will enter into this given step, right? But before that, it has also got a hook, right? So it is going to execute this particular hook before it is going to execute this step, right? Once it goes into the step, then it will look for the respective step definition. Now that step definition is present in this class. So it is going to call this method, and inside this method, then we have got this properties file, which is trying to load the application properties and getting this username value. After that, again, it is calling another method which is contained inside login page class. So it will go to this particular method. It will have the username value which it is passed from the properties file. It is going to use that to execute this line of code. Okay, so this was just a basic level of abstraction, or you can say a basic framework, right? A basic framework could look like this, where you have written your implementation inside every method and you are calling that in your step definition. But if you go into more complex frameworks, it would not be so simple. Okay, because here also we would have to, I mean, once we start writing our scripts, we would still be kind of doing a lot of repetitive work, right? And we need to eliminate that if we want to build a complex framework or a enterprise level framework. Okay, so what I mean is, if you can see here, I am for each username and password field, which is a text box, I am writing this 2 lines of scripts, which is kind of repeatable, right? I am creating that element and then I'm using send keys. Here also I'm doing the same thing. The only difference is this is having a different element, this is having a different element, and obviously the values are different. But all the other parts of the scripts are same. Similarly, for the click method, again, everything is same except the elements, right? Now, this also can be um, more optimized, where you have a single method which can enter into any particular text field, or a single method which can basically click on an element, right? So that's the next level of abstraction, where we have got methods to enter into particular fields or perform any particular operation on the browser or your application. So for that, I'm going to create another utility, which is, I'm going to call it um, I will call it the browser utils. Okay, so this will contain all the different methods which we'll be using inside the browser or your web application. So something like public static void click element, right? So this is a reusable method which accepts um, either it could accept a web element or it could accept a string, right? So let's make it let's accept the XPath here, right? So I will call it string element. Inside this, I will then write the implementation here. So I need to extend the base class. And the implementation which I have written inside this method will go there. So this particular implementation. Okay, and inside this, so I'm going to use the XPath which is being passed over here, and I'm just going to perform the operation here. Obviously, you can also make it web element, but then in that case, you need to then create the web element in your page object class, okay, which I don't want to do. I want to do all the implementation here. Okay. Now what I can simply do here is I will call the browser utils class dot click element. Okay, and then I will pass the element here. Similarly, I can have different methods for all the different actions which I'm performing on my elements, like enter text, right? And string element. driver dot find element I dot xpath. But in this case, I am obviously going to require another value or parameter, which will give me the actual text. Right. So these are the two methods which we have been using here. Right now, you can see I can call browser utils dot enter text, and I'm going to pass txt email, and then actually you can make this email. And here also I am going to use the same method here as well, only different values. Right? So now you can see there is more reusability across our framework because we are not writing the same script again and again. We are using a reusable method by passing different values to that method. Now that can be used across all the different methods across all the different page classes. So you are saving a lot of time and effort writing your scripts because you are using reusable methods, which is your part of your framework. Okay. Now we can even put more abstraction, or you can say we can convert this into more reusable methods, right? Now, instead of using the driver.find element, right? So if I'm inside a framework, I want to use my own version of find element. I don't want to use this particular find element method. Okay, I want to use my own own method. So what I can do is I can create my own method. This will return a web element. Um, right. So either I can have the same name like the Selenium WebDriver find element method. It is just going to overload it because I will have a different parameter, or I can have my own method name just to make it more clear, right? So what I want to do is find and um, wait for element, right? So this is my own version of find element, right? So this is the version of the Selenium, which is standard. Now I am writing my own find element method, okay, which I can use across my scripts. This should give me, I'll just accept the XPath here, okay. Now I will tell you why I'm doing this, but let's try and use the WebDriver wait here. Okay. And then what we can do is we can say wait dot until. So I'm basically using the explicit wait here, okay? And I will tell you why I'm using this. Expected conditions dot element by dot, or we can say driver dot find element. by dot xpath, and we'll pass the xpath here. So this is going to return us a element, and we will store it in an element, right? So we'll call it, or just call it xpath. And I will call this element. Okay, and I'm just going to return the element. Now, my own version, I also want to handle if my element is not found, right? So I'll put it inside a try block, try block, and I will handle the exception here. I will print element not found. Um, if I've got any logging mechanism, I can also log this particular message so that it is displayed in the report. Okay, for now it will just display in the console, and we need to define this outside this try block, otherwise the catch block cannot access it. Okay, and initialize this. Okay, so now let's understand what is this customized find element version of our framework, right? Um, and how we can use them. So it's pretty simple. Now I don't need to even use this. I can just use this particular thing here, this method, right? Find and wait for element. So there is more reduction of scripts, right? Because I don't need to write the driver.find element every time. I'm just putting it inside another method, and I'm just using that and just passing the parameter value here. Now that's about the driver.find element, which will basically find the element and return you the element, right? But what are the other parts of this particular method? So the other part is I put a WebDriver wait or explicit wait on this particular element. Now, in a real world scenario, it will not happen that you will be able to find all your elements at one go, right? Just by writing driver.find element, you cannot find all the elements on the page. There could be a lot of synchronization issues in your application. So your application may not be in sync with your script, and you may experience different element not found exceptions due to different reasons, right? Now, when that happens, so if that particular exception is not handled, your script is going to stop there, right? Um, the script won't execute any further. But if you are handling that particular exception, right, plus you can print your own custom message, right? So you can either log your message or print it on the console, and looking at that message, you can then easily find out that you're not able to find this particular element. Okay, you can even print which element you are not able to find, right, in this particular uh, system.out.println or in any particular logs. So that way it is easy to debug where your script has failed, which element it is not able to find, right? And then you can go ahead and fix your script. So that's one advantage of using the try catch block, right? So you handle all the exceptions on your own. You just don't leave it to the Selenium WebDriver to throw different exceptions and interrupt your scripts. Okay, so that's the reason of using try catch blocks here. Okay, now you can make this method as extensible as you like, right? You can put a lot of different moving parts inside this method to make sure that whenever you are trying to find an element, you are making sure that you are taking care of all the exceptions or all the scenarios which might throw an exception when you are running your scripts, right? If you don't use this method and you directly use driver.find element, more often than not, you will come across a lot of different exceptions, and then you need to handle that in your individual methods or scripts which you have written. That's a lot of rework, a lot of repetitive work which you are doing, which can be avoided by having a common method which can do all the actions for you. Okay, so that's what you can do in a framework with your common util methods, right? Now, one remaining part here is I am having a static wait method, wait time here, right? For this particular method, but that also can be um, changed, right? We can make it configurable. As I was talking about, this will be part of our framework.properties, right? So I can say timeout dot maximum equals to 30, and I can have a minimum time as well, which is 10, right? So you can make it configurable so that every application will have its own kind of timeouts, right? Some application may load its element in 10 seconds, some may load it in 30 seconds. So make it configurable so that anybody can come here and change this particular timeout. And it's not dependent on the script, whatever you have written inside the script, right? So they should not come to the script and keep on changing this time, every application. So to make it common across all the application, just keep it in framework.properties and then get that particular value. Okay. So similarly, we will use this properties. This time we are going to load the framework properties. And then we are going to say string timeout equals to properties dot get property, and here we are going to use timeout dot maximum. So that will return us the timeout, and then we can use it here. Obviously, this is a long value, so you need to take care of that. What's this error? So non-static field, make it static. And then we need to convert this string into a long value, right? So how we can do that is, I think, long of timeout. Maybe this way you can do. So that will return you a long value. Let me check if it is correct or not. Okay, so maybe not this. You can use parts. Yeah, Yeah, so we can use the parse long value to parse the string into or convert it into a long value. Okay, so this is basically explicit conversion where you are converting a string into a long value by parsing it using the parse long method. I mean, that's another part of the framework, right? Having your own custom util methods, right? Even don't try to use directly all the methods which are provided by Selenium. If you're trying to build a framework, have your own custom methods which will have all the different configurations or exception handlings or all the different things which are required for executing that particular script. Okay. Now, some more things which you can include, like in enter text, you can also say um, something like dot clear, right? Sometimes in text username boxes, right? In text boxes, these values may be present from earlier. So if you want to clear them before you enter them, you can put it inside this. And the most biggest advantage of doing it this way is you just need to make changes to your browser utils class, right? Whatever you change, you want to change the implementation, you change it here. No part of the script is being affected by your changes, right? Which means the page object class, which is using these methods, will not change. The test definitions, which is using all the underlying methods, will not change, right? So no changes required on any of these scripts. It's just at one place. So that's the most important part of a framework, right? Framework makes sure that your changes are just at one place. It's the most minimum number of changes which should be required to made in the event anything is changing in your particular application or your particular framework, right? So these are framework level changes. Similarly, you can have application level changes. So your XPath may change, some property may change, right? So you want to change the XPath. So you just come here to this login page and you change this XPath here. So no other script is being touched, right? So less number of changes means less commits, and you need to have less number of errors, right? If you keep on, if you write everything in one script and you keep on changing everywhere in your scripts, there are more chances of errors coming across when you try to execute the scripts. So try to minimize that level of mistakes which could be made by dividing everything into different methods. Since we are managing our driver using the WebDriver manager, right? If we would not have used that, we could have put which driver instance we are trying to use, where the driver is present, right? The driver location. So um, so here we can mention which driver we are going to use, right? So browser.driver equals to Chrome. So if anybody wants to use Firefox, you can directly come here and just change this and everything would be taken care of. No other script changes required. So everything will be handled in somewhere in this utils, right? We will have another util which will take care of all the installation for all the different browsers, and it will be just using this framework configuration, which will basically define which browser this particular script is going to use. So similarly, you can have anything which is related to framework, right? You can put it here. So things like if you are using any data sources, right? Any Excel file, you can put that path of that Excel file here. You can put you can put this features or the step definition paths there and then use it here, right? So any any type of configuration or any static values which you are replacing with your configuration for specific to framework, just put it under the framework.properties. So I don't want to share my username and password which I have created for this application, right? And which is quite genuine, right? Everybody will have their own username and password. So I can put those credentials here. Similarly, any credentials which are specific for you, right? So those credentials which you don't want to share with anyone, you can put it in user.properties. Now, since we have changed this, we also need to change it here. So instead of, we'll load the user properties. Yeah, so that's the only changes required, right? Now, since it will be using user properties, the other thing which you want to do is not commit this file into your repository, right? And how you can do that is using the .git ignore, which will basically ignore all the files which are mentioned inside this file. Okay, committing into or pushing into your repository. So here you can mention user.properties. Okay, what else? .idea, I don't want to commit. Okay, so this, it won't be directly, okay. And then what else? Target, I don't want to commit. Then what else is present in this? Okay, so I need to, I think, define the whole path here. Source, this. Okay, so that's the file I want to ignore. And now, since we have developed quite a bit of our framework, let's go ahead and commit this into a repository. Okay, so that you guys can also access it. Let's go back to GitHub. Let me create a new project or repository. So I will call it okay, and let me make it private. Launch your Git bash. I've already shown you this process, but I'm just going it once more for this particular repository. So cd users. Okay, now if I do a git status, okay, so we need to first create a repository here. So type git init to create an initial repository, and then git status. Okay, git add all. So this will add all the files. Okay. And now if I do a git status, I can see all the files which are going to be committed or pushed, right? So I just want to make sure that I am not committing the properties user or properties file, right? So you can see there are two config files, not the user or properties, which we have ignored, and all the folders which we have ignored. So these are all the relevant files which I want to commit into my repository. Okay. So go ahead and commit the changes which you have done. I will call it first commit. And then let's push origin master. Okay. Um, okay. Yeah. So we haven't added the remote repository. So use this command get remote add your remote repository, and then you can push. Okay, so there is some um, user key which is failing. I need to correct that. I think I had added a SSH user, SSH key. Okay, so maybe I need to remove it and add a new SSH key, but I will do that. Right, so I'll push this once I resolve this SSH problem. But that's how you can commit relevant files into your repository by ignoring whatever files you mention it inside the .git ignore.